guess the judge got my email. I was curious if they were going to let the alternates work with the regular jury, and then sometimes they do that. They put, in this case, there are 4 alternates, so there'd be 16 bodies in the jury deliberation room, and if somebody was kicked off or ill or whatever, then the 4 that were added as alternates would already be up to speed. They don't do that there. They have the 4 kind of kept off in their own isolation booth, and if they are needed, then they will join the main panel, and then of course they have to be brought up to speed. So Katie Cherkasky is here, Judge William Dawson, Cleveland Municipal Court Judge. Thank you both for being here. I mean, what a crazy day. I need all the help I can get here. Let me start with you, Judge. How many times have you dealt with a pro se defendant?
You know what? Very rare. Every now and then you'll get those who want to do that, but it's really rare because obviously for the same reason the judge didn't want to do it in this case, it's not something that you would suggest because it's very difficult to represent yourself in the court of law.
So give me an example of the kind of case that the defendant just said, I can handle this myself. What kind of case are we talking about?
Well, you know, the easiest ones, I would say, and in fact, the only one I would ever suggest that you handle your own case, a traffic case. But anything where you're facing jail time, I don't care if it's even a month in jail or less, you want to get someone who's experienced with the courtroom and maybe even the legal system before you go in front of that court. But maybe a traffic case, now I can understand that. But anything more than that, you want to get an attorney.
Okay, so what's your take on this defendant? What is her game plan? I've asked Katie that. I've asked most everybody that. What's she thinking? Is she thinking?
You know, I read the material. I know the judge did an inquiry to make sure that she had the mental capacity to stand trial. That really concerns me. Because for someone to just take their hands off the wheel and say that she's going to rely on divine guidance to help her in this situation, didn't even put on a defense and has nothing to say, I would probably have her reevaluated because I just think something's not right there.
So interesting brief development there in the courtroom in the Moss matter. The jury was looking at the jury verdict form and they came across a typo. And it's a critical typo in this case because it required the finding that some would be inhuman as opposed to inhumane. So they brought the jury back in, talked to Vanna White, bought a vowel. They put an E on the end, and so now everybody is happy and the jury is back in their jury deliberation room. Katie Cherkasky is here and Judge William Dawson. This stuff happens all the time. You know, these are just the mechanics of putting together a case and trying it to the public and letting them do their job. The judge, you know, I mean, if somebody finished their job there, the jury finishes up and they've answered questions saying inhuman, that could be a decent ground for appeal. There'd have to be some evidence, right, Judge, that says the jury understood that, there was no confusion by the jury, but that's not an easy argument to make.
Absolutely. You have to, like she said, you have to make sure everything is taken care of and everything is correct because it only takes that small little piece to say, hey, I want to appeal that because that hasn't been proven. That wasn't argued. So that vow that you said at the end that they bought, it meant a big deal.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's not just a vacation or a car up for grabs there. This is critical stuff. This is, again, for those who are just joining us, about an hour ago, Tiffany Moss found guilty of 6 counts, all 6 counts against her, including felony murder and cruelty to a child, and also trying to conceal the murder. And this was, of course, the starvation death of Tiffany Moss's 10-year-old stepdaughter. There she is, cute little girl who went through hell by all accounts from the age she was 6 when Tiffany became her stepmother to the age of 10 when she ultimately was starved to death. Boy, Eamon Moss literally watching his daughter waste away and, you know, Cersei Moss telling him what to do and when to do it and, you know, putting a roadblock in front of him at any time that he tries to inquire a little bit more. With me is Katie Cherkasky and Judge William Dawson. He's from Cleveland. Judge, let me ask you this first. Give me your take on Eamon Moss's testimony and his demeanor.
He's very calm, which is interesting. It seems obviously he's come to grips with what happened and the role that he played. But I tell you, you see this type of manipulation normally in like a domestic violence case where, you know, because of the love or the relationship, one person is willing to do everything that the other one tells them to do, or they're not willing to step in or stop certain things from happening. It's very rare that you see a situation where a father would be manipulated to this point where he watched his daughter go through this type of abuse. It's really shocking for me to even see this case and then to see his demeanor. Obviously, you know, he's okay with what he did, but he's he's serving the time, so he's doing the time for it. But at the same time, he knows that he did something very wrong, and I can't believe that in a normal person's mind he would let that happen.
Yeah, this is just one of those scenarios where I say, what in the hell are they thinking? I mean, what these human beings, what is going on up there? Katie, let me ask you, we know that ultimately, finally, Eamon Moss called the cops and is the reason the case unfolded when it did and how it did. But he was driving around with a coworker, going to a bar to get a drink, and oh, by the way, my daughter's folded up in a bag in the back of the car, just thought you might want to know that. And actually, it was the friend that kind of spurred him to do the right thing at that point. Something he was able to talk about, Judge William Dawson is with me from Cleveland, is the fact that the other two kids in the house were being taken care of, and the motivation, or at least part of it, for the defendant, Tiffany Moss, to avoid helping Imani, first of all, she caused the problem. Why would she want to help herself? Was because she thought she might get in trouble. She was on probation for 5 years for abusing Imani in the first place. And that's why the whole system is also on trial here. And there's a kind of a sidecar case by the grandmother of the child against all of the federal agencies and government agencies that could have stepped in and helped this child. That's a totally different discussion. But my point is that the motivation for Tiffany to avoid helping Imani at that point, this is what she wants you to think, is that, hey, I want to keep my kids. I'm already on probation. I got to kind of sacrifice one to keep the others. Judge, what do you think?
And it really calls into question Iman's sanity himself. I mean, really think about this. This is your biological daughter. And because you're in a relationship with someone else, she's putting that in her kids, and well, maybe their kids, but the fact that she doesn't want to go to jail in front of your daughter, and you're accepting that. I just find it even odd on his part. And as I continue to watch his testimony, yes, it's very believable, it's very critical, but at the same time, the calmness that he has, I mean, he's not even emotional about what he did to his daughter at this point. If it was me or anyone else, I'm sure every single sentence would be accompanied by some type of remorse or tears or something. So this guy seemed to be ripe for the manipulation. He was obviously more concerned about Tiffany and her well-being than his own daughter.
Yeah, ironically, he seems inhuman to me, without the E on the end. It's just, it's unbelievable. This is what you get when you combine an evil intent with just stupidity. I'm not an expert, and I know from those who watch trials unfold here, I can think of the Bo Dukes matter. You cremate a body, it takes a lot of heat, 1,200, 1,400 degrees. You don't get briquettes and lighter fluid like you're going to a company barbecue. But apparently that is what this father, Eamon Moss, thought he needed to dispose of his daughter's body. Judge William Dawson from Cleveland is with me, along with Katie Cherkasky. Judge, let me start with you. What's your take on this?
Just listening to him, you have two types. You have those who are mentally insane that would do something like this, and then you have those who are just plain evil. To think that you can walk into a Walmart and buy the materials to get rid of your daughter as if she's, a piece of paper or something like that, I just find it amazing. Listening to his testimony, it really breaks my heart because I'm a father. I have two children. I have a 10-year-old daughter. I can't imagine what that 10-year-old went through ever since she was 6 years old, having to deal with this type of environment. It is simply amazing. It's astonishing.
Yeah, Judge, I think that if there had been a defense put on, likely it would have been, hey, it was this guy that did everything. Eamon was calling the shots. I was just kind of, the mother. I had all these other duties I had to deal with. But would anybody have believed that, even if it was put on?
I don't think so. I believe, just like was said, they are co-conspirators. They both had an equal responsibility as parents and adults in that home. But you're right. If there was going to be a defense, the defense would be like, hey, I'm the stepmom. That's the dad. He should have stepped in. I mean, what is this whole deal about she's only eating on the weekends? That doesn't make sense. But you're right. At the end of the day, the jury's going to look at it like, hey, just like, she said, he took a deal. He's just as bad off as she is. He's evil. They made a terrible decision, and he's going to pay for it. Unfortunately, because he went first, he has a better situation than she has.
Yeah, there's no doubt the jury would have said, this spineless guy, I mean, we see who, even though she hasn't said much, you can see Tiffany Moss is, sits upright, seems attentive. I mean, just seeing that, she seems a lot tougher than Eamon Moss might ever be. The prosecution making the closing argument as the jury heads out to deliberate the life or death of Tiffany Moss. And with me, Katie Cherkasky and Judge William Dawson. And it seemed to me, let me start with you, William, that the prosecutor did a good job of discussing the alternatives the jury has to deal with, life with or without parole or death, and just kind of weighing what jurors might be weighing, like, hey, isn't it better to put her away for life rather than kill her? How do you think he did in trying to give them their options and lean them toward death?
I think he did a great job because just like you said, he laid it out. He said, hey, this is an option, but he really pointed to what should be done. You know, what's interesting in my experience here in Ohio, there's a little different phase that also is added to the penalty phase, and that's where you would have witnesses come in and those who are concerned about Tiffany and speak to her, mental capacity. Even though she didn't testify in her own behalf or have an attorney help her out, she could have at least had some people come in and speak to the fact that, okay, maybe she doesn't have it all together. There are some mental lapses that we've seen over the years, and that's something that the jury could also consider, but it doesn't even look like she's doing that. But that's why she should have had an attorney represent her to even properly help her during the penalty phase.
Yeah, there was a point at which the judge said, obviously you can present mitigating factors and your standby attorneys have gathered mitigating evidence. Do you want to present that? Have anybody speak on your behalf? No, Your Honor, I'm fine. So, okay, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to move on to the next part of the testimony here. This is actually, are we going to take a break? I'm sorry, we going to take a break? Okay, we'll take a break then. We'll be back with more right here on the Law&Crime Network. Stay where you are. And so when you get that top count and it's a guilty verdict, the rest really are not that critical, but the prosecution had many ways in which to go about to getting Tiffany Moss for the ultimate death of her 10-year-old stepdaughter. Judge, let me ask you this. So you're on the jury in this case, okay? First of all, we have to assume you're death qualified. You have no problem, if proper, to give the death penalty. What do you think the tone of the conversation is right now in that jury room?
I believe it's disbelief. Even though they've sat through the trial, they've heard all the testimony, I believe this is a chance for them to actually sigh, sit back and say, wow, we can't believe this is actually happening, which is probably why it won't take that long for a decision to be made because they've gone through all of this. So they're probably back there spending most of the time just in disbelief that they're really, really at this point. Like, can you really believe that we're deciding this particular matter when parents are involved in this type of crime?
Judge William Dawson's with me from Cleveland. Judge, do you expect this to be relatively brief, or are we going to have that kind of, headbutting going on there?
I think it should be brief, but you brought up a good point. If you have someone who has a fundamental problem with the death penalty, they may be in there struggling with the fact that, okay, maybe sitting in jail for the rest of your life is punishment enough. But I will tell you, the prosecutor laid out a very good case for it, and he did it so well, basically stating that this lady has shown no remorse at all. Her intention to kill this child was evident by her actions. She will not think about this act again. She will go about her life, make the adjustments, and jail will be her new life. So that's what has to be considered for those who are wondering if the death penalty should be imposed. You may have those who are against it, but if they look at it from the perspective that he played out, I think you'll go ahead and make that decision pretty quickly.
Thank you, Judge. I appreciate that insight from the bench, and may your worst day on the bench be better than this judge's day in going through this particular trial. Judge William Dawson from Cleveland, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time here on the network. Also, thanks to Katie Cherkasky, trial attorney. She's going to stick around for Aaron Keller's daily debrief. I will do that as well, and then I'll see you next Friday on the network right here on Law and Crime. Thanks for joining me.